The light in your bedroom might be messing with your cells. Your body's responding to Wi-Fi even if you can't feel it. This is quantum biology.
We already live in a quantum world. Lasers, the magnetic scanner in hospitals, they only work because of the laws of quantum physics.
We do have concerns about biology when it's not under the conditions of the Earth's magnetic field. You have astronauts that go into space. The problem is with at NASA, they're not really tracking magnetic fields, for instance.
People say if you play music, your plants grow taller. Why is that making my plant grow taller if I just play music?
My current best understanding is that the effects of a changed magnetic field environment are
Okay, so let me get this straight. The light in your bedroom might be messing with your cells, and your body's responding to Wi-Fi even if you can't feel it. This is quantum biology. And today we're going to break down what that actually means. Joining me is Clarice and Geoff from Quantum Biology DAO, and we're diving into how quantum physics went from the lab to all your cells. What is quantum biology? Honestly, this is one of those terms when people hear it, they instantly think, that sounds really complicated. And honestly, I would say I'm guilty of it as well. So Clarice, Geoff, would love to hear from you guys. What is quantum biology? And maybe let's try and get it in just one sentence. I don't know if it's as hard as it sounds. But
one sentence is hard. Go for it, Geoff.
Yeah, quantum biology is the proposition that our biology, our bodies depend importantly on quantum effects in a way that can be understood and used to improve or used to affect how our bodies function.
So honestly, this is just me like putting on my 5-year-old hat. You said quantum, was it reactions or quantum effects?
Quantum effects.
What are quantum effects?
I mean, Clarice, why not you?
So quantum physics is the set of laws that actually rule the microscopic world, right?
Okay.
The big world that surrounds us. It's the world of the laws of Newton that we learn in school, the laws that say how a ball moves through space. It turns out that at very tiny length scales, at the length scales of a couple of atoms, a couple of molecules, and usually at very fast length scales, say as fast as a nanosecond or a microsecond, it turns out that there is a new set of laws that takes place. Those laws are not mysterious, they're just different. And those laws are studied under the corpus of knowledge known as quantum physics, right? And what's cool about quantum bio and about quantum physics in general is that there's a scale shift effect whereby tiny effects happening very fast ends up having macroscopic results at much larger time scales. And for example, I just want to say that even not talking about quantum bio, we already live in a quantum world, like lasers, the magnetic scanner in hospitals, GPS, and even your laptop. They only work because of the laws of quantum physics. And it turns out that there's a body of evidence that keeps on growing. It's an incomplete body of evidence, and that's where we enter, our project enters, but there's a very compelling body of evidence that shows that even within living matter, such scale shift effects might also be in place, that tiny things happening in very localized parts of the cell at very fast time scales end up having big time effects on how the whole machinery of the cell works. So just to end, I would like to say that our take on quantum biology is that it gives us a fundamentally new knob on how to actuate in biology. What we want to do is actually learn how to control those endogenous, those native quantum degrees of freedom of cells to do stuff, to cure diseases, to mess up in good ways with your cell by design.
So let me play this back and see if I understand it correctly. And if I have it wrong, please correct me. Is it so it sounds like it's understanding the micro physics or movements, the quantum physics at like a super small level, and how those laws affect cells and the overall systems and processes, which is how you get to quantum biology. But you don't have quantum biology without quantum physics. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. The when people have encountered quantum physics, they may have encountered uh, ideas like electron or proton tunneling, more maybe more superpositions, entanglement. These things show up in movies and so forth, where they're think we're still working on figuring out how to display the quantum stuff in movies accurately. But there's a whole bunch of surprising phenomena that occur at that level, including particles existing at discrete energy states and moving back and forth between them, which, as I understand, it's where quantum physics actually gets its name. But so there are those things, and then it's historically been believed that those things are too small or too fast to end up having a macro effect in biology. It's like if you understand the chemistry, why do you need to get down to understand the physics? And of course, in the chemistry, you have to understand the physics, but part of the idea of quantum biology is that actually biologists would do better in understanding how the body works and how organisms in general work if they brought in the knowledge from quantum physics.
So interesting. I have to say, I'm honestly honored to just be in a virtual room with the both of you because this is far beyond the scope of my knowledge, and I would love
No,
to
but
hear.
isn't this cool?
Oh
Isn't
my
this
gosh,
cool?
it's wild! It's so cool. I'm now just thinking about part of what I would love to get into, and we'll get there. Is like, so I'm sitting in an office with a computer, with a phone, with a device, with Bluetooth, with Wi-Fi, with all, LED lights. And I'm just like, an iPad over here. And now I'm just like wondering, like, is all of this stuff, is it
Okay, let me calm you down. Let
bad?
me
Is
calm
it
you down.
bad? I'm getting a little
Okay.
bit stressed, but I didn't, as you're talking about like these, I don't even know if nano is the right word, just like micro movements and physics and the dynamics that are happening at that level, it leads you to wonder. I mean, it probably doesn't
Okay,
take
I'll
much to
calm you
And
down.
influence.
I'll
well,
calm
well,
you down there.
actually,
So
well,
here's the deal.
well, maybe
Can I?
Clarice. Yeah, yeah, go ahead. I was wondering if you were going to talk about and make the bridge to weak magnetic field effects
Yes,
first, because we got to
Yes.
yes,
get from quantum to that.
yes.
There's another
So
leap. Here we
So,
go.
so a quantum leap. No. So basically, there are different flavors of quantum
Okay.
biology.
Okay.
The flavor of quantum biology that we study is how cells interact with weak magnetic fields. And by weak magnetic fields, I mean the type of magnetic field, the strength of magnetic field produced by your cell phone, the strength of magnetic field produced by the Earth. I'm not talking about the strength of magnetic field that you get, for example, from a magnetic scanner in a hospital, that people entering those cavities, that's just a big ass magnet. So we study the effects of weak magnetic field on cells, and weak magnetic fields have been shown to alter the whole machinery of the cell, to how fast cells divide, to how much energy is produced, to how much DNA gets repaired, to how much ion channels work. And this is what we study.
Yeah.
Now, the important thing to realize, and that's an integral part of our work, is the fact that cells respond, or different parts of the cell, different molecules in the cells respond to a very precise band of magnetic field intensity, frequency, and sometimes direction. So when people ask me, well, should I be worried about
Yeah.
my
My
cell phone?
phone.
No, but hear me out. Hear me out. So weak magnetic fields can both up and down regulate the machinery of the cell. What I usually tell people is that it would have been either really bad luck or really good luck of your cell phone provider if they chose a combination of frequency, intensity, and direction that actually does something to your cells. I think that the most likely scenario is that it doesn't do anything in particular, which
Well,
is not saying we
can
cannot
Clarice,
use that for function. Yeah.
can I jump in really quick? So the now there we do have concerns about um, biology when it's not under the conditions of the Earth's magnetic field. So something that we've talked about quite a lot is you have astronauts that go into space, and while they're outside of the regular outside of the Earth's magnetic field, there's a question of, we know astronauts end up being negatively affected from being in space, and that's typically attributed to microgravity. The problem is that, and from our people we've talked at NASA, it looks like, or with at NASA, it looks like they're not really tracking magnetic fields, for instance, up in the International Space Station. And that's because they've assumed that the magnetic fields in question are too weak to actually have an effect. So there's a confound there. From a scientific perspective, if you want to control the relevant variables, the magnetic field in space isn't being controlled for. Now, and Clarice mentioned the large amount of literature that talks about weak magnetic field effects. One thing that we did at the Quantum Biology Institute was that we got a hypomagnetic chamber, this big metal cube that about 1 meter on each side, that blocks out the Earth's magnetic field. It's got a particular nickel alloy shielding to block DC fields. It's got a copper shielding to block out AC fields, and some more stuff that helped us get the magnetic field in the chamber down to basically zero, is less than 1 nanotesla. The Earth's magnetic field, by comparison, is like 45 milliteslas. So that's like much stronger. And we found in 2 different species.
Microtesla.
Microtesla. We found in 2 different species that we raised inside and outside the chamber. We have a control that is similar, temperature, lighting, and humidity. We found that the organisms raised in the hypomagnetic chamber behaved differently. We had tadpoles that experienced accelerated development or aging, and we had killifish, which this is a cool type of fish that has this weird hibernation state it can get stuck in called diapause, and a whole bunch more of them got stuck in diapause when they were in the hypomagnetic chamber. So removing the Earth's magnetic field has an effect. And then, Clarice, I think it's for any given particular band, like 5G in particular, it would be especially bad luck if that ended up having some specific effect. But we do now live in an electromagnetic environment, which is quite different than the one under which humans evolved. And so then there's a question about whether or not that is affecting us. And this is one of the questions at the Dow that we currently have as a thing to study in our science working group. We have literature, as far as I understand it, the literature is mixed, but maybe Clarice knows more about the literature.
I just want to talk a little bit about space exploration. So as far as we can tell, the magnetic field effect is really like a blind spot at NASA and other space explorations because, well, if we want to occupy Mars, we do need to start thinking about magnetic field conditions. This is a hypothesis that I got to it after reading papers and papers of this. My current best understanding is that the effects of a changed magnetic field environment are chronic for adult organisms, but acute for embryos and developing things. So I wonder if without any type of control of magnetic field, whether we can reproduce in Mars, whether we can grow food in Mars.
Yeah.
Right? So those are cool things that people need to start thinking about. And again, coming back to the idea that even if we find out, we don't know that it's a question of interest, even if we find out that cell phones do or do not affect our health, I think there is a huge opportunity to start using very crappy devices like cell phones as an app, right?
Yeah.
If we have the code book on how to control weak magnetic fields in biology to actuate very precisely for function, you might have an app in your phone and then you say, well, today I need help with wound healing. And then you go there, you click a button for wound healing, and then you do like this. Imagine that for like global health. It's like global health for anyone with the reach of a cell phone, which is cheap, which is remotely actuated. This could be incredible. Research on this is just starting, and the time is now.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, there's so many things that you guys just talked about. Like when you were talking about NASA and how they don't measure that, all I was thinking about was the astronauts that were stuck in space for what I don't months, and what a missed opportunity that was to study, the effects because they were up there for longer than normal. And then Clarice, you just talking about like your device instead of, I mean, that would be such a cool paradigm shift right now. I mean, I do think people are starting to get a little bit more paranoid of the, the magnetic waves that they're, or the electromagnetic waves that their devices are emitting that they don't know. And if you could change that from a bad thing to a good thing, and like you could control it and use it for different things, that's a leap I didn't even know was in
Right?
the art of
Yeah,
possible.
yeah. So just to make sure, right now this is science fiction,
Yeah.
and it's also rooted in a very real possibility.
Yeah.
Right? We want
Wow.
to start this as soon as we can because
How
we
cool.
do think that's the future.
Yeah, I mean, and the immediate reach that you could have, because I mean, I know everybody doesn't have a cell phone, but man, a lot of people do. So now, one thing I know we jumped right into it, and my mind's already expanded greatly. I would love to know, how did you guys, like, what is your background? Like, how did you get into or get interested in the idea of quantum biology? I don't know if it's something you can go right into, or if based on
I'll
reading.
start, and
Yeah.
maybe Jeff can tell us the origin story of the quantum bio ecosystem. So, I am trained as an experimental quantum physicist. This means that I build instruments to study and control things that are so small and
Yeah.
so well protected from their environment that they're better described by the laws of quantum physics. It turns out that you can mathematically prove that if you use a quantum object, like an electron, as a sensor, your measurement is improved. In other words, the sensor quantumness enhances your measurement. In my past, during my PhD, I built an instrument to study and control um, an electron in the material diamond that was a very good sensor of magnetic fields, a technological quantum sensor of magnetic fields at room temperature. So this is really how it starts. After my PhD, and sorry, humor me for a second, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I spent 1 year teaching, and then I started sending CVs out for postdoctoral positions to work in someone's lab as a research assistant. By complete chance, I ended up in a chemistry department, and I was involved in another project that I won't talk about, but because I was immersed in a chemistry environment, I realized that chemists were aware of quantum sensing like phenomena happening inside electrons inside proteins for decades, except that they don't call it quantum sensing because the fields don't talk. So for me it was really weird, but there are proteins that have been known for decades to sense magnetic fields in a way that a quantum physicist would describe as bona fide quantum sensing. Right. So then I had the idea of trying to develop the same type of instrumentation that I use to study and control my technological quantum sensor, to study and control those nature made, nature optimized quantum sensors. So, Jeff, do you want to talk about the origin story of the?
Sure, yeah. So the challenge with quantum biology is that in order to really advance the field, we need to move beyond just getting measurements of weak magnetic field effects. This has been something that's been happening for decades. We actually need to develop the instrumentation that will allow us to capture and study quantum phenomena as they're happening. It so happens this is possible, but it requires instrumentation that is much more complex and much more expensive than, for instance, the hypomagnetic chamber, which I described. And so there's just this question of, where is the money for that going to come from? Clarice had been reaching out to, writing grants and so forth, encountered a bunch of difficulty at UCLA where she was working, decided to leave academia, but was also reaching out generally for who could help with this. She ended up emailing my company, Leverage, which is a independent nonprofit research institute that one of the things we do is we identify fields in science and technology that we think are stuck, but have a lot of potential and could be made to break through now. We learned about quantum biology. It was fascinating. Looked into the science. Basic science seemed good. And Clarice had laid out a research plan that seemed like it would cause the field to break through. And this is assuming the hypothesis is correct, etc. But so we teamed up and did this big fundraise, lasted a bunch of months, talked to partners in government and philanthropists. We talked to VCs. And it turned out that the place where there was really excitement and energy for this project was in crypto. This was a big surprise.
How did you discover that? Like where did you make that connection? Because I think for a lot of people, and I've been closer to the DeSci space for a while, but how everyone finds crypto plus science is a unique journey, and would just love to hear how you made that connection.
Well, I had some crypto experience previously as an advisor to the Reserve Project, but then I was one of my friends learned about the quantum biology project we were working on and introduced me to Vincent Weiser, who then introduced us to the team at BioProtocol. And then there was this process of figuring out, is this real and can we do this? Because obviously in crypto, one needs to be careful. And also, even if the whole thing is real, we just don't have a bunch of the knowledge. We concluded that, yep, it looked good. Clarice and I started talking to lots of people in the decentralized science world. We went to Thailand, and we were actually there in the room when Vitalik and CZ gave their blessing to DeSci. So we saw lots of people.
I was going to say, what was that like? Because I saw it through the feed. So would love to know what it was like having them in a room together.
What was really interesting, at least I don't know what Clarice's thoughts are, but I didn't realize that there were crypto celebrities. We were there in the room, and someone came in and announced that there was a special guest. And then Vitalik walks in, and everyone's, like, amazing, it's Vitalik. And then another person announces that there's another special guest, and CZ comes in, and everyone is, all, excited about this. And so I just, I didn't realize that crypto celebrity was a thing. It is a thing.
Yeah,
So,
you guys were in a room where I feel like lightning was caught in a bottle. So it's they are absolutely very well-known figures in the space, and not only to be in a room with them, but I don't know if they've been or how often they've even been in a room together. So truly a unique.
And if I may, I want to give a big shout out to Bio, right? Because Bio made it happen. And we were part of Bio's second cohort of incubated DAOs. And so again, we have only good things to say about Bio's involvement, about Bio's support. And I really do think that Bio is poised to become like the Y Combinator in the DeSci space.
we basically had been working with Bio to get the DAO ready. And then we were ready and we were planning on launching in, I think, April. But the time was now. So, our third co-founder, Alessandro, joined in. We did this major, talked to tons of people on, you know, discussions with scientists and, discussions with tons of people in DeSci and X spaces and produced tons of materials. And then we had a really successful fundraise and, launched the token, and now we're in DeSci. And and now we have at the Quantum Bio Institute a lab that is building the microscope. We have a satellite lab in Maryland, which is doing the sort of top-down microbiological studies to help us, omics studies, to get more information about what the mechanism is on magnetosensitivity, or quantum magnetosensitivity. So yeah, that's how we got to where we are.
Did you guys have a chance to share your work with CZ and Vitalik? And would just be curious if you did, or even with people in the room.
I
Um,
had 10 seconds with
oh,
Vitalik.
10 seconds. That's amazing. What happened in the 10 seconds with Vitalik?
He
Play by play.
listened. He listened, poor him. He listened and acquiesced. And there's a photo. I
How
wish that
amazing.
we could have gotten like maybe 20 or 30 seconds. If you
Yes.
know any way of making that happen, I would be super excited.
Anyone in the audience, powers that be, if you have a connection, let us know. But I will say, even at the top of the call, when we started talking about quantum biology, it would be hard to do it justice in 10 seconds. It would be very, very hard, very, very hard. Now, I wanna kind of like we talked a little bit about like what all of this research could mean, and I would love to hear. So you spoke a little bit about the different initiatives that you guys are doing with the funding. Would love to hear like the so what of that. Like what are the hopeful outcomes of your research, and what would it ultimately, lead to? And I would say more in like this might be a leap, and I don't know if we can make it, but for a person listening who knows nothing about quantum biology, what work are you guys doing, and what would it mean for someone like me sitting at home if it all went how you wanted it to go and you learned what you wanted to learn and it progressed? Like, what would the outcomes of that be?
Clarice shared a vision before of, imagining that you've got an app on your cell phone that you can click and causes your cells to heal more quickly. You could imagine. I mean, there are a bunch of different things that can be investigated in quantum biology. The one that the Quantum Bio Institute is focusing on first is magnetosensitivity. So this is a future where we have figured out how to harness weak magnetic fields. The easiest way to imagine this is you've got smart clothing. The smart clothing has tiny magnets in it. The whole thing is attached to your cell phone. And then there's a question about what the quantum mechanisms actually attach to in biology. Like, if they attach to metabolism, or do they, attaching to cellular DNA repair, do they, cellular repair, recovery? Maybe they end up affecting sleep. Maybe they end up affecting many, many things. But so you could imagine the ability to modulate all of that with a cell phone, where if it ends up affecting metabolism and you want to speed up or slow down digestion, then
Oh,
maybe
it
you could
does
have.
affect metabolism. There's data that it does affect metabolism.
Yeah, so and we expect that. And one of the reasons I'm so excited about this area is that we've spent so much time looking at the mechanical and chemical effects and phenomena inside cells. We still don't really understand biology. This just
That's a
really.
crazy, like you say that, and that sounds crazy because we all take, like, I took biology in high school, I took biology in college. It's just like, I feel like when people sit and think about biology, to someone who's listening, it's like, well, I'm taught it in school. We must know everything about it, but we don't.
No, we really don't. And in fact, there's enough that we don't know that it really seems to me like there's a missing piece, at least one missing piece. And so then the idea that there are quantum effects, there's a perfect sociological case here, which is that in general, the biologists haven't wanted to learn the quantum physics because it seems like it's scary and mathematical. And then the quantum physicists haven't wanted to learn the biology because it seems squishy and hard to control. So then you have this area between the two fields that really hasn't been explored that much. So you can imagine, I was describing this future with smart clothing. The thing that would be happening is that scientists would be working out how cells work in much greater detail and with much greater explanatory power, such that as they figured things out, and this is further future, but you can imagine, you get over-the-air updates that improve the apps on your phone that let you modulate the way your body functions differently. And
And just to
so,
make sure, this is without the need of genetic engineering. Those quantum degrees of freedom are there, they're native, they're just waiting to be harnessed.
Wow. So you're not really like changing anything. You're not making something that's not naturally occur. You're just like optimizing within what's naturally happening.
there's we think that the effects are already present inside cells, and so it could be that the thing you're doing is just restoring function. It could be that you're tweaking the thing in some way outside of its native function. The point, though, is that there are tons of possibilities, and if we actually manage to figure out how this particular factor in biology works, then that's going to open tons of doors.
Do you?
Just a,
Okay,
oh,
go ahead, Chris.
can I just
Mhm.
add something? And this is just for the quantum biology flavor that we're particularly interested right now. There are many other things that we want to do in the future, but there are several other flavors. I think another one that is worth mentioning is there is, again, partial data, but compelling data that molecular recognition might also be quantum mediated due to another effect. And molecular recognition underlies a bunch of other stuff, from how viruses attach to cells to how antidepressants work and what not, right? So imagine, again, if we could use this other flavor of quantum biology to build better drugs, to to prevent viruses from attaching to cells, and the list goes on and on. There are many other flavors of quantum bio, right? So I think that this is extremely cool. And another thing that Geoff didn't mention is the fact that whatever flavor of quantum biology we talk about, I think that there's a huge possibility of humans learning with nature how to build better technologies, right? So the example that I usually give is humans got to quantum physics 200 years after the Industrial Revolution. Imagine nature. I think that nature is the utmost quantum engineer that there is, right? So can we learn with nature how to build better technologies?
Yeah, I mean, it got here on its own, so it must be doing something right, So learning from that is probably the best source of knowledge that we could go to.
The one question that I had about this, and actually it's just a question for Clarice because I don't know. So one of the major known or believed quantum effects in biology is photosynthesis. Here, apparently, electron tunneling plus quantum noise assistance ends up making photosynthesis much more efficient than one would expect. And so this is just something we haven't ended up talking about. But so, Clarice, I'm interested. Does this have potential applications for making better
Oh,
solar
sure.
cells?
Yeah, yeah, totally.
Okay.
Totally.
Have
That's
people
it.
have people explored it?
No, people have simulated that using quantum computers to simulate what goes on in photosynthesis, and they find exactly that. As you add the quantum character, in this case, Geoff knows what I'm talking about. If you add noise, you end up increasing the efficiency of information transfer. So people have modeled this. I think that people don't fully understand this practically or with a code book to be able to exactly mimic this, right? And this is, I think, this underlies all this quantum bio stuff because people have been seeing those effects for long, if people have been seeing effects that are consistent with being driven by quantum processes for long, except people cannot control them by design. Coming back to the flavor of quantum biology of weak magnetic fields, there are companies that, as far as I can tell, by chance, found weak magnetic fields that can reduce the size of brain cancer, that can produce muscle regeneration, that can reduce inflammation for diabetic patients. And even talking to some of those people, the impression that we have is that they got to those particular fields haphazardly, right? Imagine how much power we would have if we understood with a code book how to tweak those things up and down, right? And this is the proposal of our work is going one step ahead and not only observing those effects, observing that they exist, but learning how to rationally control them.
Okay, this is gonna, I don't know if I'm tracking, but are you guys like even thinking about, I feel like people say that if you play music, your plants grow taller. And like, is that the kind of, like, I know it's not light, but like, is that the kind of like micro reactions that would be like, why is that affecting photosynthesis? Why is that making my plant grow taller if I just play music?
I've thought about this. In my limited knowledge, I don't understand whether a quantum phenomena might be behind that. This said, uh, living beings are very good antennas, right? They're specialized into getting external stimuli and doing something with them. So, in particular, we mostly studied electromagnetic excitations,
Yeah.
right? And how, but I don't know if it's quantum or not, but I would now not doubt that there are things in plants that can respond somehow to music. I cannot say if it's quantum or not, but if I needed to bet, I would totally think there could be some physiological thing in the plant that would respond to sound. I don't see any reason why not. Again, nature is crazy intelligence.
Yeah, it's probably, scary how intelligent it is. I mean, honestly, I know I said this, that's how we got here. So there are processes like we can't see or don't fully understand that allowed us to the whole world to get to where it is. So, yeah, it's doing something right.
Another thing, Jeff and I have a hypothesis that the senses, in particular, might be very good places to look for quantum phenomena in biology, right? Our senses are probably extraordinary, right? So we think that, for example, there is also partial evidence that the sense of smell might have a quantum phenomenon behind it. So I particularly think that uh, the senses might be a very, so again, I particularly think that there's some quantum bubbliness underlying basal functioning of the cell. And I also think that looking at the senses might be a very good way of trying to find quantum effects in bio.
It's so crazy thinking about like I don't in this day and age, there's so many devices, notifications, technology that you hear of people being overstimulated, but you think about like I was just sitting here like, oh, my coffee, the smell, the taste, the devices, the light, the sound, and like at a cellular level, I can only imagine all that these little cells are consuming and trying to process with everything going on around just at my little desk, just my little tiny desk. So it's crazy.
One thing that we've thought about is, I mean, there's evolution is trying to take advantage of any mechanism that it can. So there's really a question of, can evolution take advantage of quantum mechanisms? If it can do it in some cases, that at least is reason to think that maybe evolution is taking advantage of quantum everywhere or in many, many ways. And then Clarice talked about working with quantum sensors and how you can have special quantum states that make you more sensitive or better at detecting things. You could imagine that cells started off with a quantum sensitivity, and then so long as that continues to be helpful, that's a thing that may then be preserved through evolution. You could end up then in a state where our eyes, nose, ears, etc., end up being actually responsive to quantum phenomena. That's not been established, but the the hypothesis is suggested by the fact that the eye can pick up single photons. Clarice mentioned there's some evidence around smell. The ear is apparently very, very, very sensitive to small things. And so there's a picture on which actually quantum sensitivity is this really useful thing and has been part of the picture of life all along.
And to that, our satellite lab in Maryland, ran by Mike Montague, who's like a synthetic biologist, he is trying to find magnetic field sensitivity in very, very simple organisms. The implications of that, we think, is that if it's already present in very, very simple organisms, it's probably likely that this sort of is present in way more complex organisms. Right? So this is one active line of research that's going on in our lab right now.
You're making me feel a lot smarter. Like my whole system is a lot more intelligent than I give it credit for. It's really not only what's up here, but the whole system at the cellular level, all of the processing that is going on to just truly the environment, the light, the sound, the senses. I mean, I am leaving this conversation feeling really good about myself.
Well, let me add one further thing to this, which is that if the senses are quantum sensitive, but if you imagine that the brain isn't able to use that information in some way, then it's not going to be advantageous to retain that sensitivity, right? So it's like if you have high res senses and a low res brain, then you're not going to be able to take advantage of the high res senses.
Yeah.
So if you have the high res senses, in this case quantum sensitivity, that gives at least prima facie reason to consider whether human cognition is itself in some way sensitive to quantum effects. Now, I know people are going to then want to jump to consciousness immediately. That's
I
an entire challenge.
I am having a fit here. Okay.
Well, no, this
Clarice, agree.
Well, no. So I'm bracketing consciousness, and just talking about the processing inside of an organism. It's like if the processing is low res, but the senses are high res, then it's harder for the organism to take advantage of the material from the senses. But if the processing is high res, then it can. I'm just saying this paints a picture on which maybe the processing that's going on, and we believe this occurs for for later stage organisms in the brain, is quantum sensitive in some way. And it doesn't even refer to consciousness. Didn't refer to consciousness. Didn't refer to consciousness.
Your take on that.
No reference to consciousness.
I agree with what Geoff says. But here's a pet peeve of mine, and it's a very deeply ingrained pet peeve. Unfortunately, a lot of people get to quantum biology because there's someone who's a very good scientist, came up with an idea that consciousness has to do with quantum phenomena in the brain. Okay, I'm not going to tell whom, and we're going to tell more of this.
It's Roger Penrose.
Okay, Nobel Prize in physics. And he's a mathematical physicist, he's not an experimentalist. And his theory, it's on the with all due respect, I really respect him, and his theory is outlandish, a little bit outlandish in my. So I did spend some time earnestly trying to understand, trying to put numbers. I don't get it. Maybe I am wrong. And I feel that because of that, a lot of people are introduced to quantum bio via these more fringe things, right? Right. It's this theory
Mhm.
that got mentioned in Ant-Man, the movie,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
so forth. I just want to make sure that maybe one day we will get there. And in fact, if his theory is true, it involves the fact that entanglement, which is the highest level of complexity for quantum states, might be involved in whatever phenomena. What we're talking is a little bit, for example, the magnetic field shtick has to do with a slightly simpler effect. And in any case, you cannot have the most complex effect if you don't have this slightly simpler effect. So
Well, I
maybe one
mean,
day we'll get there. Yeah, go
well,
for
I mean,
it.
well, on, I mean, not to, be overly precise, but the mechanism which I think is, the Quantum Biology Institute's favored hypothesis is this thing called the radical pair mechanism, which actually involves two electrons being in a superposition state that depend on each other. And as far as I understand, that's actually entanglement. Now, Penrose's thing involves entanglement of many more particles
Well,
over larger spatial scales. So I do think they're different. I mean, look, it's we just so this is for people, just encountering these ideas for the first time. It's like, what is superposition and entanglement? As far as we've understood it, entanglement is when you get essentially correlated superpositions between multiple particles.
and
Does
the
that
thing that we
lead to consciousness, or is that no?
Well,
You're like, don't say that. Don't say that.
so the thing that we study is superpositions being used for function.
Okay.
The thing that Penrose does is entanglement being used for function. As a general rule, you won't be able to get to entanglement being used for function if you do not have superposition being used for function, or superposition existing for long enough for it to matter. So all of this is to say that I just want to distance ourselves a little bit, and I hope that we at the Quantum Biology Ecosystem Institute and DAO, we are the ones providing another entry path for people interested in quantum bio, right? It's a different take. I think it's way less sensational, right? We don't have to think about, oh, telepathy and stuff and consciousness. I am a bit allergic to that.
And
And I think,
Clarice,
yeah.
for people listening, like I think there's this whole there's a whole bucket of science that I think people put in a bucket of pseudoscience. And do you hear that with quantum biology? And like what do you say to people who think it's pseudoscience?
So let me give you some stats. Those stats are from the end of the year. So I've given about, at the end of the year, I had given about 130 odd talks in 90 odd
130 talks.
throughout like 5 years.
You've been busy.
In 90 odd talks, that's about 69%. There was always, I keep tabs. I keep tabs. I hold on to my okay. Uh, in about 69% of those talks, there was always someone at the end who raised their hands saying, "This is all BS. People are reporting experimental flukes. The experiments are not well controlled. Those effects are not real."
Why
Right? When I
is
talked
that? Where
about
does that come from? I
well,
don't,
so
I
we
don't
there are different hypotheses here. Sorry. The
No, I'm just like so curious because as I've heard you guys speak, I even feel like at a layman's level, I don't get, I feel like I understand conceptually what you're saying and it should be studied. And so I don't understand why people make this leap to it's pseudoscience.
well, there's I mean, there are different. Um, well, notably, Clarice's data shows people pushing back on weak magnetic field effects rather than saying that the thing is pseudoscience. And
Hmm.
so I think Clarice and I have a different interpretation, and it could be multiple things are happening. But the thing that I've noticed is that there are different scientific traditions. So like the Russian scientific tradition, for example, just has looked way more into electromagnetic effects. And
the, the,
why
the, the, the Asian tradition,
that's
Russia,
right.
China, and Japan.
Yep. Yep. So people just have looked into electromagnetic effects more. And then in the West, you frequently get this question, what's the mechanism? And so my account of this is that what's happening is that the people are largely unfamiliar with the possible quantum mechanisms, and and there haven't ever been direct observations of long-lived superposition states. This like gets us to the core of the thing. So I think a person on who's just a scientist with no bone to pick and has never thought about pseudoscience in any way, any topic, never thought about whatever. I think they could say, well, the cell is complex and noisy, and that noise is likely to cause the relevant quantum states to collapse more quickly than they would need to. Basically, they collapse before they can actually have a biological effect.
Just a tiny parenthesis. Everything that starts quantum dies classical after a very short time. That's what Geoff is referring to.
So, okay. But then there's this question of how long. And so the mechanism that QBI has been looking into, the radical pair mechanism, there are estimates that it's 700 nanoseconds is the length of the state. That sounds really short, but usually people think that it's much, much, much shorter, so that you can't actually have this quantum effect. So I think what's happening is that the pushback is coming from a general theoretical view on which quantum states shouldn't be able to last that long, to the idea that to the conclusion that there's no mechanism for weak magnetic field effects. And then if someone produces something and there doesn't seem to be a mechanism, and this actually happens with studies of telepathy. There's a bunch of studies from the past where people like hold up cards and try to guess cards and so forth. And because people don't have a mechanism, even if you do the studies, even if the studies replicate, and this is a whole interesting thing to look at, people are like, there's no mechanism, so the thing has to be wrong. That's a fact about the Western scientific tradition right now.
It's so interesting. I was reading something yesterday about just like, and this is at a global level, but there's like something called the Edelman Trust Score, and it looks at a global level various dynamics of how people are feeling from like a trust standpoint. And it was looking at over the last 25 years the deterioration of trust, and I think a lot of that has been driven by a lot of things, but certainly exacerbation from COVID, I think, really moved things to a different place, and also like geopolitical stuff. And the bottom line of like the overall trust score is, I think now more than ever, because people aren't as trusting of what they're being told, they're doing this like self-investigation, this self-study.
We have plans to remedy that. So totally.
Yeah, and to me, like I am so, I feel really like blessed to be at this time in society because of the empowerment that comes with that. Like I'm not being fed the answers. I think people are getting a lot more like involved and asking the questions and taking things that I feel like were in the shadows maybe because people told us it should be there, and setting them front and center and demanding that we answer it and ask questions about it. And you can't tell me it's not meaningful. Like, let's find out.
So let me tell you something, that we're very fortunate to be in the DeSci movement, because we are free from some of the limitations of academia. And I think it's one of our main advantages. Something that our team is extremely committed to is to do what we're tentatively calling radical open science. So we intend, for example, to put our electronic lab books in real time available in the internet for everyone to see. We're committed to putting all our data all our code. Uh, our If anyone is interested, all our technical group meetings are open for anyone to just drop in the Zoom and see, because exactly because of that, because I also think that there is a crisis in how much people trust scientists, and I think that this is a little bit what academia forces you to do. So
Yeah.
since we're out of academia, we need to take advantage of better
Yeah.
ways of doing things.
And there's power in that openness too, the shared knowledge, the collaboration. So I think the openness becomes the moat, and as opposed to trying to build around a moat around something that's closed. I know you guys have probably much more important things after this conversation I'm realizing to get to. What I'd love to end with is just if people who are listening were interested in what you had to say or want to get involved, how do they plug into the work that you're doing?
So we have a community on Discord, quantumbiology.community. Follow that link, and that will take you to the Discord. We also have a weekly digest at quantumbiology.substack.com. So if you want to get involved, meet the people, we have at this point 40 or 50 people who are involved in some way, maybe closer to 10 or 20 sort of people closer to, sort of more active, doing more things. But we'd love to have more people reach out. This can be scientists who want to learn or contribute, or people who don't have any background in the science but are just interested and want to help out. And then the digest in there on the Substack is
And
just for
Twitter,
people who want to. Right, and of course we have the Quantum Biology DAO on x.com.
Quantum Bio DAO.
Quantum Bio DAO.
Perfect. Well, I am so grateful for your time, for your patience, and it walking me through a very 101 understanding of what quantum biology is, how it works. And honestly, I have to say, leaving this conversation, I feel, Clarice, you made me feel better about all the devices I'm sitting around, but also like it's not a scary thing. There's understanding that can be used for good, and that, we all have all of this energy around us, and there are these micro things, nano things happening, but think about the future, and if that's understood and harnessed, what it could unlock. So I just want to say thank you guys for your time. We will be sure and share those links that you just mentioned with our community. And for folks listening, if you have any questions or any topics, honestly, that you want us to go deeper on with Quantum Biology DAO, I would love to have you guys back. We just barely scratched the surface.
Thanks for having us. We'd love to come
And
back.
Geoff, do you want to tell what I always say?
Oh, I mean, may the quantum be with you.
May the quantum be with you. Mic drop. There's nothing else left to say. So good. Thank you guys for coming by. We'll see if what the people want, and see if we can have you guys back.
All right, amazing.
Totally.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.